conversation with Dr. Michael J. Bina, 2020 recipient of the Mary K. Bauman Award from AER. Moderated by Paul Olson, Superintendent of North Dakota Vision Services School for the Blind in Grand Forks, North Dakota.
My name is Paul Olson, and I'm the Superintendent of North Dakota Vision Services School for the Blind, and I have the pleasure today of talking to and interviewing the legendary Dr. Mike Bina, who does have North Dakota and South Dakota roots that we're very proud of. Just recently, in October, Dr. Bina was awarded the Mary K. Bauman Award, which is the premier award that AER gives out. AER is our professional organization, and the Mary K. Bauman Award is a special award for an educator who has had major contributions. Mike, I'm just going to invite you to say anything you would like to begin with, and then I've got some good questions for you.
Thanks, Paul, for this opportunity. I'm happy to talk to about my career, and it still is a very exciting opportunity. I retired in 2018. I just couldn't completely retire, so I called the local school system and I asked, do you need any orientation mobility instructors? And the woman on the other end of the line, the supervisor, said, can you start tomorrow? So I started teaching 2 days a week. This year I'm just doing 1 day a week, but to go back to being a teacher, this really was exciting for me. I started out teaching mobility, then I got demoted to become a special ed director, then I got further demoted to become a principal, and I got really demoted to become a superintendent. And now I got promoted back to my career love, and that is being directly with the students and learning from them. And I think that's what I've learned in my career. The teacher, I think, has to be open to being the student themselves, and what wonderful teachers I've had, not only colleagues that I worked alongside, but the students and the families and the parents. I think we learned a lot. It's a family. I believe blindness is a family affair. So working with the children and even adults, you still involve the family because they are the center surrounding the blind or visually impaired child or adult. So I've been enriched so much, not only learned from students, but enriched by the students and the clients and the families and colleagues, of course.
Mike, tell us a little bit more about your roots in the Dakotas.
Well, that's an interesting metaphor, their roots in North Dakota with that fertile soil that you have there. I always tell people here in North Carolina that if you take a seed and even get it close to that black dirt a yard away, it'll sprout. Here we have clay, but anyway, so when you talk about North Dakota, I think of the farmland and the wonderful place to be born. I was born in Grafton, 30 miles from Grand Forks, where you are. And then it's cold there. I remember that as a youngster, but I remember my father one cold winter evening reading the seed catalog, thinking about the garden he was going to plant, talked to my mother and said, you know, I've heard if you move south, it gets warmer. Maybe we can escape this cold. So the next year we moved our family to South Dakota. There's a difference between 45 below and 25 below. I had the opportunity to experience both North and South Dakota, but I will say having that opportunity to go to school in a small town where you really develop friendships, and that's some outstanding educational opportunities. But I remember going to Aberdeen, to Northern, where I came from a class of 26, to this big town of Aberdeen, big classes where students came from large high schools. I felt very inferior, kind of low self-esteem. These kids went to Sioux Falls High School and they went to Aberdeen Central, and how was I going to compete academically? Well, I didn't realize at the time that the skills that I developed in this small rural high school were pretty solid. Could write, could do basic math. It all boiled down to work ethic.
How about athletics when you were younger? I know you became an avid swimmer. What other athletics were you involved with?
When you go to a small high school, as you know, you're going to be on the football, the basketball, and track. Had I gone to a bigger school, I probably would have had a job in a grocery store after school. But I think my coaches in all of those sports kind of showed me that outside of the classroom, you can really impact students in expanded core curriculum activities, be it athletics, be it leisure time, recreation, or whatever. But I think athletics were, and music also, part of developing the whole child. That's what our blind kids need, are those opportunities to be on athletic teams, to be in bands, to be a cheerleader, to have those experiences. So that's what parents have to look at, is where can my children get the same opportunities that there are other children that aren't blind or visually impaired yet. And I think every adult that's in the National Federation of the Blind or American Council of the Blind, or they would say, I was enriched not only by good academic teachers, but those expanded core curriculum opportunities, sports, music, recreation, really contributed to my confidence, my skills, and my future success, because it translated into things that I learned that I benefited in my career.
Mike, I just want to say quickly too, this isn't about me, but early in my career in the early 90s, when I became aware of you, because you were the president of AER in 1992 for a couple of years, and knowing your roots here and knowing that your background was orientation and mobility, that got my attention. And that's my love as well. So my hope, when after someone either fires me or I retire, one of the two, that I'll be back teaching orientation and mobility as well, just like you're doing. So that is pretty inspiring, because you go back to your roots. So Mike, tell me, why did you get into this field? How did you could have probably been many things. In fact, I know you were a smoke jumper. Why didn't you just stick with that? Why education of children that are visually impaired?
Well, I enjoyed smoke jumping, but I didn't see that as a career. Jumping out of forest or jumping out of airplanes into mountainous region where the fire was burning, that was good, exciting, and it provided me money when I went to college. So I think if you ask most people how they got into the field of blindness, they probably would say, if they were totally honest, accidentally. I was privileged to attend Northern State College at the time. Now it's Northern State University. Out of my dormitory window, fortunately, was the South Dakota School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So when I should have been studying history and math and English, I kept daydreaming and looking out the window. And I watched these blind children play on the playground, run track and field, ride bicycles. And there was this one young man who had a girlfriend. And I watched him every day with his girlfriend holding hands, walking down the sidewalk across the street where the school was. And I realized that young man has a girlfriend, and as a freshman in college, I don't have one. And the funny thing about this story is the phone rang about 2 weeks later, and Dean North, the principal at the School for the Blind, called and found out that I was a swimming instructor, and asked me if I would teach the blind children to swim. And my response to him was, I declined a job offer. And I said, Dean, I appreciate the opportunity. I called him Mr. North. Appreciate the opportunity to teach children at your school, but I don't have any special training. That translates to, at the time, I now admit, I was afraid of the disability. I didn't know anything about blindness. I wanted to do a good job, but I didn't know about blindness. Well, Dean North said, and I remember this vividly, he said, you don't have to worry about teaching, or you don't have to have knowledge about teaching blind children. They are excellent teachers, and they will teach you. So Dean kind of twisted my arm a little bit, and I reluctantly took the job. And within, as nervous as could be with that, I opened the pool door, and the blind kids came in. There were about 15 of them, and I had another instructor with me. And it took me probably 39 seconds to realize these were children first. Blindness, you didn't even notice that. And one of the things that drove that home to me, I told him right on, I said, you have to follow the instructions. We have to be safe. If there's any horsing around, you're going to be doing push-ups. Well, I think 41 seconds into the opening of the pool session, I had blind students doing push-ups. They were just like any other typical normal kid. Short attention span, they wanted to have fun. But so I was an English major at the time, and was going to be a PE teacher, and could have been offered jobs all over the Midwest, high school English teacher, basketball, football coach. But I made a career change. Those blind children jumped into my heart, and I graduated from college with an English major. But soon after, then I went into the Army for 3 years. And when I came out of the Army, I said, I don't think I'll can be an English teacher after working with those blind kids. So I changed my major to special ed, went to Cal State Los Angeles, and got my master's in orientation mobility. As I said, I wasn't planning on going down the path, but I think the path found me.
Now, I want to mention something too, because I want to share a little bit about you. You might not get the opportunity to say these things. Again, having worked at the Texas School for the Blind, Indiana School for the Blind, Perkins School for the Blind, finished your career at the Maryland School for the Blind, and in fact, are still working. The Hadley School for the Blind, which is a correspondence school that's available across the country and even internationally to people. You work there. But you mentioned something early in your career, that you were a swim instructor. Dean North called you. Dean's a wonderful guy, by the way, and pulled you in, and then that was kind of the inspiration. You've continued to have an interest in sports and the United States Association of Blind Athletes, USABA. Tell me about that connection a little bit and how that's been a part of your career.
So when I was at the Indiana School for Blind, actually was the Wisconsin School for Blind, I had two colleagues that were coaches at the Indiana School, and they were going to start USABA, and they asked me to become involved in the development of USABA, and I told them I would love to do it, but I'm going to go to the University of Northern Colorado and work on my doctorate. So I regretted that I wasn't able to be involved in USABA at the onset. And it always bothered me, but I made a commitment that someday I would become more involved and pay my dues in that organization, because I firmly believe that not only the elite athletes that go to the Paralympics, but all children and adults need physical activity and movement. And so after, I think I was in the Maryland School for the Blind, I got asked to be on the USABA board and later became the board chairman and spent probably 10 years with the organization. But yeah, that was my payback to the organization, since I could not be involved at the onset. But you used the word inspiration. Talk about inspiration, having the opportunity to go to the Paralympics in Rio de Janeiro, go to the Paralympic Pan American Games in Peru, and going to the World Championship goalball tournament in Sweden, to see the universal nature of blindness. And again, internationally, there's no difference. Languages are different, but blindness is blindness. It impacts everybody in similar ways. But to watch the harmony and the good sportsmanship between countries that typically, politically, there's not maybe that good of a relationships, but I think sports are a good ambassador for world peace and improving the well-being of our countries, the world. So it was fun to see these elite athletes who really, really worked hard. And when you look at the blind elite athletes, you don't see blind, you just see athlete. And they're just incredible men and women who sacrifice their careers. One young man gave up his job, gave up going to law school to train for the Paralympics in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the National Goalball Center of Excellence. So he spent time away from his law school dream, and he went to Rio and earned a medal there. So these young people sacrifice their careers to represent the red, white, and blue, our country. So to me, that's inspiring, and that gives me goosebumps. So it was a privilege, or it still is a privilege, to be involved with USABA. And I would give a little plug. Every blind child, every blind adult needs to be physically active to improve their health, to reduce their stress, to help their just socialization and involvement in their neighborhood. So USABA has many programs to get young people and older adults involved. So go to their website and check out those opportunities.
Mike, I think, again, you were talking about these elite athletes who've sacrificed. And again, it's the same thing as so many people that are sighted. I mean, that's what's inspiring about it. I know the other thing too that I always think about is people don't have to be elite. They don't have to make the Paralympic team. It's the matter of people just being engaged in their communities, being involved, that activity. I'm so glad you said that too, because some of us aren't elite athletes. It's just a matter of participating and camaraderie that people have when they're doing that together. So thanks for sharing that. You know, there's been a lot of things that have been inspiring. Are there any things you've really been frustrated with or challenged with in your career over these years?
I'm glad you asked that question because I remember giving a presentation or was asked to give a presentation, I don't remember when, 20 years ago. The title of the presentation was Administrating Educational Programs in Special Education Under Financial Duress with poor economy and lack of resources. And in the facilitator of the panel talked about how bad things were financially. And the question to me was, how do you manage in bad economic times? And my response was, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. It's never been good economic times. I guess my point to that is, no matter what it is, there we are, and we have to deal with it. And I don't know that I would call it stressful, but I think that's where we have to reach down deep within ourselves to find solutions. Nobody said it was going to be easy. If it was easy, anybody could do it. So I always found fun in trying to create different avenues to get additional resources or to help improve the schools where I were in terms of the facilities and the operating budgets. And I think that's where I got my satisfaction is I remember being in one state that was a very conservative state politically, and they did not support education that well. Well, we ended up building a new swimming pool. We ended up adding a lot of new improved programs. So I think that's, to me, was the fun of being an administrator, making do with what you had. And maybe that goes back to my North Dakota and South Dakota roots that, if you don't get rain, you got to hunt sometimes. And if it gets too much rain, then you got to adapt to it. You can't control nature. And we certainly, as administrators, can't control the finances that come our way. So one of my university professors always said, no matter where you go, there you are. I never quite understood that, but basically deal with it at where it is. Complaining doesn't work, but I think your question, Paul, is good. That's where you have the Council of Schools for the Blind. That's where you have AER. That's where you have professional organizations, CEC. That's where you start partnering. You call your neighboring state and say, could we collaborate? Can we work together? Can we share resources? But I've always found too, the general public is very quick to provide funding if you go to them and ask for their money. Now, I've never had a hard time asking for money because I wasn't asking money for me. I was asking money for the children, the programs, the staff. And if you put forth the mission and you put forth a good case and do good planning and preparation, give them a tour of the school, this, and you do this every day. People want to be helpful. One of the board members I had at Hadley said one time, I kept asking him for assistance and advice, and I kept apologizing. I apologize for asking you so many questions. And he said, no, that's why I'm on your board, number one. And number two, the human heart needs to be needed. And when he said that, I wrote that down. I paused. The human heart needs to be needed. So the question is, at bad financial times, this is the time to ask for assistance. I didn't say help. There's a difference between asking for help and asking for assistance. So yeah, I think I took the most pride in my career when times were tough. And I don't want to say work the system. That's not what we did, but getting the most out of it, that which we could, because the states were required to provide support, and sometimes we had to remind them of their responsibility.
Our kids, if they are in a specialized school for the blind, they deserve to have state-of-the-art campuses and technology, et cetera. It's what does make the difference besides just people encouraging and believing in them. We have some challenging times right now. As we speak, our pandemic is getting worse in the country. We anticipate it will get better, but our public school systems are challenged right now in providing services to our students. All students are challenged, and all schools are challenged nationwide. We're particularly concerned about our kids that are visually impaired because of access technology. But whatever setting they're in, these are challenging times. So I think the message you just said is we are where we are. But do you have any insights on how we'll get through these coming months during the pandemic?
I think the pandemic has, unfortunately, it's hit all of our families, tragically, and it just, terrible to see what it's doing to families with extreme illnesses and deaths. And we go on with our lives. We calculate risk. We go out less. We use good protection, social distance, wear a mask, and all of that. And there is fear, but we've got to get on with our lives. But the fact that we've gone distance learning for so much of our instruction and using Zoom. But a year ago, you would say Zoom, and they would have no idea what they thought we were talking about. A car that went by too fast. But so we've used our technology. We've relied on our technology, and we've actually realized that it is a tool that when we go back to the more normal life that we knew before, we're probably going to use our technology more because it is a supplement. And so on other boards that I'm on, we're finding that sometimes, I don't want to say there's a silver lining in the tragedy, but it's not. So some of the students I've been teaching virtually, they actually do better virtually than they do in person. Let's, for example, a student with autism. Take away the distractions of the school, changes in schedule, all of as I said, the frustration for the student. So if I get a student teaching mobility online, I can zero in on concepts much deeper, and it's more of a one-to-one. And so, but yeah, I salute the colleagues around the country. I every day go to the O&M website and other PVI websites, trying to find ideas how I could be a better teacher. One of my high school motto was, when you're through learning, you're through. So, I'm getting long in the tooth in terms of age, but it still excites me to find out new ways to do things. So I appreciate all the colleagues that are willing to share ideas and make me a better teacher.
We know that there are parents there across the country now and traditionally who have a lot of resources and get good advice. We have some folks who, they're doing okay, and we have some parents that are really struggling with all of this. Imagine you're a parent of a 6 or a 7-year-old who maybe has some new onset of blindness, and they're fearful and what's ahead. Do you have any advice for parents?
I think if I had advice, I would have already written the book. I think it's such a personal situation. You just described one of the families. Little girl that I have is a first grader, and she's had many medical complications, and the family's afraid to send her back to school. She needs to be in school with her peers. School, you learn academic content, but there's socialization. You learn from your peers. The playground, the recess, the cafeteria, the lunchroom, riding the bus. Yeah, I think our children, what concerns me going forward is what they're missing out on. And we talk about critical learning phases and stages, and we learned in our university programs that once you bypass those critical learning stages, you can't go back and make it up. So I'm afraid of the gaps that are being created. That's why I'm hopeful we can get the COVID under control and get back to our new normal. But yeah, I think this family that keeps their child home every day, they're looking at her health and safety, number one. My advice is everybody make a good personal decision, safety first, and then education come second. But it's a risk. You have to balance the risk. Should I send my child back to school and take the risk? Well, that's a personal decision. Depends on the school circumstances and how careful. I talked to a couple of teachers here in Charlotte that are into going back to school now, and I ask how safe is it, and they say, well, some of the buildings I walk into, people aren't wearing masks. Well, people need to get serious about this. I mean, my advice is be careful.
Your experience has been largely at specialized schools for the blind, but we know the vast majority of children nationwide are in public school programs, many of which are just excellent. For the parent who is trying to decide, and there's opportunity for them to weigh in and to decide, would the benefit for my child going to a specialized school outweigh my current local school? That those are some things people really wrestle with. Do you have any wisdom there?
I remember in my doctoral program, Dean Tuttle saw that I worked in primarily schools for the blind in my career. He said, I want your first administrative job, Mike, when you get your doctorate, I want you to become a director of special ed in the public school. I want you to experience both service delivery models. I spent 3 years in Wisconsin in the public school. And yeah, I think the answer to the question, that's a local decision or really a parent decision. But I'm an advocate of the full continuum, the full array of services. I think children should benefit from both. Maybe they start out with early intervention services through the School for the Blind. They start kindergarten in the public school program. Maybe in third grade, they come back to the School for the Blind for 1 year, or maybe they do weekend outreach. That's why one of the things, Paul, that I'm really happy with to see the evolution of outreach programs, where it's not one or the other. It's School for the Blind. It could be public school programs, but the bridge to residential schools and day school programs and in the public school are those outreach programs. So, come in for the summer programs. But I think, and I've seen children that go through their whole career in a residential school with no public school experience. And I've seen the converse, students that only go to the public school, no school. I think they both lose out by not having that diversity of experience. The socialization in the public school, but and maybe in the public schools don't have the time to do or the resources to do the expanded core curriculum. Paul, one of the things I learned in my career, you always talk about the scarcity of financial resources. To me, that's not the major problem. The major problem in our schools, residential and public schools, scarcity of time. There's just not enough time. You can't make up the gaps that kids have with all the academic requirements and all of the expanded core curriculum things that you need to do. So the clock ticks faster than we can provide the services. So yeah, I think moms and dads need good counsel and good advice, but it's, it has to be a personal decision. Thank goodness we have a thing called the IEP. We do a good assessment. We do, tell the parents. One of my concerns in my career was that we were never telling parents about all the options. So some of the states I worked in, it was a law. Parents have to be told what all the options are, and then they can make an informed choice of what is the best program for them. There should never, ever be competition between schools for the blind and public school program. Ralph Brewer in Tennessee came up with a concept called the Unity Conference. We brought in public school teachers to the Tennessee School for the Blind and the public school or his residential staff. It was not so much the presentations that they had, but it was an opportunity for them to find out we're all allied soldiers fighting the same common enemy, and that is dependency, public attitudes, negative public attitudes about people with disabilities. So yeah, we're allied soldiers. Maybe we wear a different uniform, but our enemy is not the other service delivery option.
I think you just channeled the late great Dr. Phil Hatlin talking about the continuum of placement options, because I think he said it so in a similar way. It's not a one size fits all for their entire career. I mean, and at different times, those experiences, and they should be varied because life is very changing. And so couldn't agree with you more. You have a long history with AER, the Association for the Education and Rehabilitation of the Blind and Visually Impaired. There's 3,000 or 4,000 members of AER nationally. We have a lot of folks nationally who are in the vision profession, who may not be a part of AER. What can AER bring to a professional that's of value?
I've been on a soapbox all my career. I got involved in AER. I realized that if I go to the doctor, I want my doctor to belong to a professional organization. I want my doctor to go to continuing ed opportunities. I want my doctor to be talking to colleagues about the latest surgery they did so the doctors can get better. I find it unusual in our field that belonging to a professional organization is an option. And the reason that a lot of people don't want to join, the expense, and I would break it down, I think it was 31 cents a day for joining AER. Belong to a professional organization Because how are you going to get better professionally? How are you going to make sure that you're providing the best services? I think the families that rely on you, the students and the clients that rely on you, need to have professionals. Where are they getting their information? Where are they getting their professional journals in their, what I always call opportunities to rub elbows at conferences? And so I'm a strong advocate for, we should have 100, every service provider in our field, and I'm talking what Rick Welsh would say, are we really a profession if not everybody belongs to a professional organization? We have professional responsibilities to belong to a professional organization. Somebody has to contribute to curriculum development. Somebody has to commit to adding to the body of knowledge of research and publications and doing that. So there's, to me, I always took it very seriously. I think, we all work hard doing lesson plans and doing the instruction for our students, but then there's the weekend work and the evening work where we would do the creative aspect of maybe research or curriculum development or writing an article for publication, but working on policies, working on codes of ethics, working with Bill Weiner in my career. You gotta be serious about this. You just can't be an average service provider. You can be maybe the excellent teacher service provider, but that extra value added opportunity can only come through a professional organization. Brian Garrettson used to always like one of my phrases. I like an AER, CEC, Cosby, all these professional organizations to a health club. That's where you go to exercise your professional muscle. That's where you go to get your continuing ed. But if you don't work out your brain and your just like you got to work out your muscles in the health club. And to me, it was a place, health club, a wellness club. Maybe it was a wellness place, an oasis to go to have confidential conversations with other service providers. We're talking about the frustrations. What do you do? How do you deal with this? But if they're oasis, they're opportunities to get better. So I always took that responsibility seriously. My family, when I was AER president, I would be loading my suitcase in my trunk of my car Friday afternoon. My kids were home from school, and Amy, who was about 11 at the time, or maybe 10 years old, said, "Daddy, are you going again?" And I said, "Yes, sweetie, I'm going again." I put my suitcase in the trunk, and she said, "AER?" And I said, "Yeah." And she put her head down, and it was going to be pizza without Dad on Friday night, and she's going to have to put up with her brother without me there to referee. And Amy looked at me and said, "Daddy, I have a question for you. What is AER?" She had no idea where I was going. I told her it's the Association for Education and Rehabilitation of the Blind and Visually Impaired. If you called her today in Greensboro, North Carolina, and said, "Amy, what is AER?" she would tell you what it was. And I don't think AER is very popular in her book because it took Daddy away a long time, but that was a labor of love for me to contribute to AER and through my professional responsibility.
I think Amy would now say that those sacrifices were well worth it. And I just, at risk of sounding cliche, I'm just going to say amen. Thank you for talking about the benefits of being an AER, or CEC, the vision division of CEC as well. Very strong, because people are strengthened when they are learning together, and the inspiration you get when you see a colleague beside you that's digging into some research. And look, everything's changing, so we need to look at that research. Our landscape has changed entirely, and what we're going to be doing this year and in 2 and 3 years from now is very different than 10 years ago. However, I would say learning how to track across that line of Braille is going to be the same. Learning how to, children using a good 2-point touch technique going down the sidewalk with their cane is going to be the same. So those foundational things are there. But thanks for talking about like the research and how being with your colleagues in a professional organization is strengthening. And you already shared that you're teaching orientation and mobility now, and it's inspiring, and you're digging in and checking new resources to be able to provide the best instruction to the children you're serving now. What do you foresee as the next chapter of your life?
I haven't thought that far ahead. I think one nice thing about retirement or semi-retirement, I'm thinking about the boat that I just bought and enjoying the time having the grandkids on the boat. Yeah, I like to write, but there's so many things to do in a day. I'm not finding time to sit down and write. I'd like to write out some of my experiences that people could read, and they would be short vignettes with maybe starting out with a quote. And I thought about this about 10 years ago, but I never had time to do it. I think the title of the booklet would be Administrative Wisdom. Is that an oxymoron? Administrative wisdom, is that an oxymoron? But it would be your question was, how do you deal with difficult times? When the going gets tough, who do you turn to? Something to give you hope, something for you to keep the faith, something for you to realize that you're on the right track. And Paul, one of the things that strikes me, that I've learned too, I think our service providers, TVIs, O&M instructors, the people that work in our schools, public schools and residential schools, I think we underestimate our impact incredibly. I don't think we realize what we do. I think Facebook has helped me realize that some of my students have contacted me, and I find out that they're doing so well in their career. And when they say, "Gee, thanks, coach, for this," or "Thanks for this," I don't think we realize at the time what value we're adding to their lives. And some of it's not what we teach them skills, but it's giving them confidence. It's helping them to believe in themselves, pushing them, making sure they're independent, treating them like kids, not like blind kids, but look at the full potential, look at the high expectation. And if I could give a takeaway or a talking point or a call to action, and I did this in Maryland, we need to stress to our students to be independent, to become interdependent, but to be independent. Mom and dad pull away, cut the apron strings. Teachers, stop teaching so quickly and be more patient. Use more wait time. Wait. I had a teacher or a student tell me when I was teaching mobility that I taught too fast and that I didn't wait long enough for the answers. Let them process the information, but let them achieve it on their own. Get the skills, let them take risks. But I think my point, and I kind of did a diversion there, but our staff need to work with these kids, our service providers, realize how important they are in the mom and dad's life, the sibling's life, and also the client and the student. But we have a lot of power by the skills that we have. And as we give them the skills that they get. But when you go home at night, you should feel good. You're tired and you have paperwork to do, and the paperwork increases. But I can tell you, when you look back on your career like I have, when I'm doing it, I calculated, when you started in the field in 1965, it's 2020 now, that's quite a few years. But when you look back on your field and you look at all the students that you work with, and whenever somebody retires, I always remind them, look at all the people that you touched. Look at all the people that you impacted. You should feel really good about yourselves. You should be grateful that you had the opportunity, but what a great job you did. But I don't think they hear that enough. And I think if they heard it more, maybe their morale would be a little higher. But we as administrators, Paul, that's our job, is to remind them what a great job that they do. It's not easy. I don't know what I'm going to do in answer to your question, and I'm not going to worry about it.
You talked about being a coach. You're coaching right now. You're coaching your colleagues. And I think a coach does have a lot of impact. We're teachers, we're rehab specialists, we're mobility instructors, but everyone needs someone coaching them. And that coaching is like that little encouragement that says, give it a try. If you fail, you fail, but you're learning. So I really liked what you said as well about letting students take risks, whether they're sighted or blind. I mean, it's all the same for everyone. That's how you build confidence. Mike, I want to thank you for giving us some time. This is something that I am really hopeful that our colleagues and many of our parents will have an opportunity to watch. And in spite of the fact there's so much content out there and people are short on time, but you do have some really great advice, and thank you so much.
I just want to add to something you said, Paul. You know, when a coach encourages their athletes or their students, and an administrator does the same thing. And you know, the quote that I saw, somebody who worked at Maryland said that, you know, every student needs a champion in their life, somebody that really believes in them when other people don't. So teachers can be, you know, the coach, but sometimes being a student's champion. And I think everybody that does this work uh, knows that they how to be that champion for someone. And the other thing that this same person taught me, and I'll leave you with this too, is we have to remind our students that they're not going to take us with them when they leave high school. So that sometimes it's very stressful, the transition graduating, and I've seen students really stressed. They're surrounded by all these support systems, but yeah, start reminding kids, you're not taking with me the rest of your life. You're going to be on your own. So I appreciate the opportunity, Paul, and the privilege to talk to you, and I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mike Bina. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for watching. For more information, you can contact Dr. Michael Bina at bina1@yahoo.com. That's BEANUH1 or Paul Olson at POLSON@nd.gov.